Vera Holt's signed affidavit lay on the long table, its fresh ink dark against the white page. In the Broward County Courthouse hearing room, no one moved as she looked straight at me and said, "I backdated the lien because Miranda told me Jessica would never see the original." Miranda made a sharp, furious sound, and the county officer reached for the affidavit. I watched the evidence cabinet door swing shut, the metal latch catch, and my knees weaken. This was still before the bare branches outside the high window, before the record had nowhere left to hide. "Put the suitcase in the trunk, Jessica." Dorian stood in the apartment doorway with his office supply badge still clipped to his belt, as if this were one more delivery he needed signed for. Wednesday's late afternoon light lay flat across the Cedar Falls parking lot. My throat tightened so suddenly I had to press one hand beneath my ribs. At 12 weeks pregnant, I had learned that fear could make my stomach turn before I even smelled anything bad. Behind Dorian, the kitchen carried Miranda's sharp rose lacquer scent, strongest in the corner by the old coffee maker. If you have ever stood outside your own home while someone you love decided you no longer belonged there, subscribe and stay with me. I did not know yet how much a locked door could reveal. "I'm not putting anything in the trunk until you tell me why your mother is standing in my kitchen," I said. My voice sounded level, which surprised me. Miranda Moore, 58, leaned one shoulder against the counter in a cream cardigan, watching me the way she watched contractors when she managed a building problem. Dorian's jaw worked once. "Let me explain," he said. "You've been upset for days, and the bills are getting worse. Mom thinks we need space." I looked past him at the dining table. My prenatal folder lay open beside a stack of mail, its pale blue cover bent where Miranda had moved it. The sight of it made my palms go damp. "Space?" I asked. "You mean I leave, 12 weeks pregnant, while you stay here with her?" Dorian looked toward the kitchen instead of at me. That was answer enough. Miranda picked up my folder with 2 fingers and brought it to the doorway. "No one is asking you to be dramatic," she said. "Dorian has debt. You have your inheritance. You can manage for a little while." My inheritance savings sat in an account I had protected since my grandmother died. $33,600. I had counted it twice that morning, as though checking the balance could make it grow. Dorian knew every dollar. Miranda knew that he knew. I took the folder from her and walked back through the apartment for my suitcase. The bedroom smelled like Dorian's shaving cream and the lavender detergent I had bought on sale. I packed without choosing carefully. Jeans, 2 sweaters, my work shoes, the prenatal vitamins from the bathroom cabinet. When I returned, Dorian had set the suitcase by the door. He reached for it, perhaps to look helpful, but I caught the handle first. "Don't," I said. His hand dropped. "Jessica, this isn't forever." I watched him swallow. "Then say that without looking at her," I told him. He could not. Outside, the air had the dry, leafy smell of early fall. I lifted the suitcase into my trunk, feeling the weight pull at my lower back, then shut it with both hands. My prenatal folder went onto the passenger seat, where I could see it through the windshield. Dorian remained inside the apartment. Through the screen door, I saw Miranda return to the kitchen and switch off the light over the sink. Then Dorian stepped back, and the deadbolt turned. Miranda opened the door only a few inches. Dorian was no longer beside her. The rose lacquer smell slipped into the hallway around her. "People survive by being practical," she said quietly. "Practical women do not build lives on love." Her eyes moved to my car, my suitcase, my hand resting over my still flat stomach. Then she closed the door, leaving me in the apartment driveway with the lock clicking into place. Through 3 days, I slept in my car outside places that stayed open late, worked my pharmacy inventory shifts, and kept driving because stopping felt more dangerous than exhaustion. Saturday morning found me in the probate auction office in Cedar Falls, sitting beneath a humming fluorescent panel with a paper cup of burnt coffee between my hands. The office smelled of toner, dust, and rain-soaked coats. My phone kept vibrating in my handbag. Dorian's name flashed across the screen, then disappeared, then returned. I let every call ring out. His first voicemail had been thin and rushed. "Jessica, please call me. Let me explain." The second said Miranda had pushed too hard, as though he had not stood there while she did it. I deleted neither message. I wanted proof of how easily he could make himself sound helpless. At the front counter, a clerk had left stacks of probate listings in plastic trays. I pulled one toward me and read every address, every estimate, every warning stamped in block letters. I counted costs automatically. A cheap place could still eat money through repairs, taxes, insurance, heat, water. Near the bottom of a thin packet, I found the Ellery property in Broward County. The description was blunt. Isolated house, 46 miles from town, sold as is, cash only. It included an annex behind the house, locked and transferred with all contents. No interior photographs, no guarantees, no financing. The assessed value had been crossed out and replaced with a lower figure in blue ink. Someone had written "unwanted" beside it, then tried to scratch the word away. I read the page again while my phone buzzed against my knee. A house in the middle of nowhere was not what I had pictured when I saved money. I had pictured a modest place near work, a crib against a painted wall, a kitchen where no one inspected my choices. But the listing had one thing the others did not, a price range I could reach without asking Dorian or Miranda for anything. The locked annex bothered me. So did the cash-only condition. Still, I had spent enough time around inventory to understand that a sealed room meant someone had not finished accounting for what was inside. I copied the auction date into my notebook, then wrote the exact maximum I could pay, $31,800. My handwriting shook on the final zero. I folded the Ellery listing along its existing crease and slid it into my handbag beside my phone. Dorian called again before I stood up. I watched his name light the screen, listened to the office printer grind out another page, and walked past the counter without answering. About 2 weeks later, I had spent my lunch breaks checking title notices, driving the route to Broward County, and practicing how not to look frightened when other bidders looked at me. By Saturday afternoon, the auction was over. Wind pushed dry grass against the tires of my car as I stood before the Ellery house, a weathered 2-story structure set far back from the county road. Ruth Ellery, the county auctioneer who had listed it through probate, waited near the porch with a canvas file bag tucked under one arm. "You're Jessica Moore?" Ruth asked. She was 46, brisk and sun-browned, with the expression of someone determined to finish a difficult job cleanly. I told her I was. "You registered from the probate listing," she said, checking my identification against the paperwork. "Congratulations, you bought the property." Her voice did not make it sound lucky. I signed where she indicated, paid $31,800 for the house, and handed over another $1,200 in closing costs. When Ruth passed me the deed, I slid it into my handbag. $600 was all I had left. Ruth pointed beyond the house to a narrow outbuilding with a rusted metal roof. "That is the annex," she said. "The lock is included, and so are the contents. Read every line before you decide what to throw away." I asked whether anyone had been inside recently. She shook her head. Not since probate took possession. The prior owner kept records there, according to the file. She gave me a ring of keys, wished me luck without smiling, and walked back toward her county vehicle. I watched her drive away until the sound of her engine thinned into the wind. If you found sealed records in a building you had just spent your final savings to buy, what would you do first? Tell me in the comments, because I stood there with $600 left and no one I trusted enough to call. The annex door groaned when I forced the key around. Cold, stale air rolled over me, carrying mouse droppings, old paper, and the metallic smell of a long unused heater. A single work table stood beneath a dusty window. Along one wall were shelves of empty jars and broken tools. At first I thought the room was nothing but junk. Then I noticed a loose board behind the table. My fingers trembled as I pulled it aside. Inside the wall cavity sat a stack of sealed document envelopes wrapped in oilcloth. I carried the bundle to the work table and opened the first envelope with my car key. Original loan records spilled out in thick cream pages, each one bearing stamps, signatures, and lending company letterheads. On the third document, my own name stopped me cold. Jessica Moore. A lien for $74,200. My skin went numb from my scalp to my wrists. At the bottom of the page were Miranda Moore's initials, neat and sharp beside the filing notation. I turned another page. The paper shook so hard it rasped against the table. There, beside a date Dorian had sworn he had never visited Bryan County, was his signature. For approximately 2 weeks, I had slept in the Ellery house, worked through the damp smell and broken latches one cost at a time, and spent each evening in the annex with the loan archive spread across the work table. On Saturday, October 10th, the light outside had gone copper gray by the time I stopped pretending the envelopes were random. I arranged them by postmark, then by the pressure of the handwriting, then by the initials stamped on the seals. My palms were damp. The annex heater clicked without producing warmth. Each time wind pushed against the metal roof, I flinched and looked toward the door. Most of the envelopes carried the same narrow, hard slant in black ink, the capital M cut downward like a hook. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards Miranda sent Dorian, on notes left in our apartment kitchen, and once on a list of bills she had taken from his hand without asking. I did not say her name aloud. Saying it in that little room seemed likely to make it more real. Instead, I compared the sender lines against the loan papers, holding the pages close enough to smell old glue and dust. A porch light came on behind me, spilling a yellow stripe across the gravel. I turned so fast my chair scraped. A woman stood several feet from the annex door with both hands visible at her sides. She wore a dark quilted coat and sensible boots powdered with dry grass. Her gray hair was pulled into a low knot. "I saw your light," she said. "I'm Mara Vance. I live in the farmhouse past the field. I didn't mean to startle you." I kept one hand on the papers. "You did, a little." "That is fair," Mara said. Her voice had the calm, carrying quality of someone used to speaking through a screen door. "You're the woman who bought this place." When I nodded, she looked past me at the work table. "I used to deliver mail out here, rural route, before I retired. I remember addresses." Her eyes settled on the nearest envelope, and something in her face tightened. "May I?" I should have said no. The papers had already taught me what carelessness could cost. But Mara had not stepped inside until I moved aside, and she touched the envelope only at its corners. She studied the writing under the bare bulb. "Miranda Moore," she said quietly. "That is her hand, no question." My throat closed around a breath. Mara told me that for 3 years before the annex owner died, she had delivered sealed envelopes addressed to him, many with no return address. Still, she had seen Miranda place more than one directly in the outgoing mail slot in Cedar Falls. "You knew her?" I asked. "I knew the name on the envelopes," Mara said, "and I knew the man who owned this place hated visitors. He'd take the mail from me, look over both shoulders, and bring it straight here." She glanced at the wall cavity. I told myself it was none of my business. That was easier when I had a route to finish. The cold seemed to move through my coat. Who was he? Mara gave the former owner's name, then shook her head as if she regretted saying it. He used this annex like a private office. Records, correspondence, things people did not want in their own houses. I never opened anything, but Miranda came by more than once. Her car was always spotless, even after rain. She smelled like sharp roses. The word roses made my stomach turn. Miranda's rose lacquer scent had been strongest in one corner of our kitchen, where she stood while Dorian told me to put my suitcase in the trunk. Mara looked at the lien bearing my name, then at Dorian's signature. "Your husband's mixed up in this?" "I don't know how much," I said. "That is what scares me." She did not offer comfort. I appreciated that more than I could explain. She told me she would not touch the archive again unless I asked, then backed toward the door. Before leaving, she pointed to a thin cardboard file crushed beneath a stack of ledgers. "That one wasn't here when I delivered mail," she said. "At least, not where I could see it." After Mara crossed the yard toward her farmhouse, I pulled the cardboard file free. The paper inside was newer than the rest, clean at the edges and smelling faintly of printer toner. Tucked between two old property maps was a photograph. For a second, I could not understand what I was seeing. Then my blood went cold. It was me, asleep behind the wheel of my car, my head tilted against the window, the Ellery house blurred behind me. Someone had taken it after I bought the property. I slid the photograph into my coat pocket and stood very still, listening to the annex roof tick in the dark. For approximately 3 weeks, I had kept the photograph in my coat pocket, copied every page I could afford to copy, and searched the annex ledgers during the hours when my hands were steady enough to read. On Saturday, October 31st, I found Caleb Dune's name beside 3 heating repairs and one line that made my mouth go dry: access panel removal. The ledger listed a phone number. I called from the kitchen, explained that I owned the Ellery property now, and heard a long silence before Caleb agreed to come that afternoon. He arrived in a heating technician's work truck, 42 and broad-shouldered, with a faded work jacket and a face that looked prepared for bad news. I recognized him only from the name in the ledger. He parked by the annex and remained beside the truck until I opened the door. "You said you found records," he said. "I found enough to know somebody hid them," I answered. "Your name is in the repair book." Caleb rubbed his thumb along the edge of his keyring. That job never felt right. He followed me into the annex where the archive covered the work table in labeled stacks. The heater gave off a dry, metallic smell. When he saw the lien with my name, he stopped walking. His eyes moved to Miranda's initials, and his shoulders lowered as if he had been carrying that site for years. "Miranda Moore paid me cash," Caleb said. "She said the owner wanted old boxes removed before he died. Said there were personal files, nothing more. I loaded what she marked and took it to a disposal place outside the county." He swallowed. "She was very clear that no copies should remain. I thought she meant tax stuff. I wanted the work." "You knew she expected it destroyed," I said. "I knew she wanted it gone." He looked at me directly then. "That is different, but not different enough." I asked him why the envelopes were still here. Caleb walked to the wall behind the table and crouched. He ran his fingers across the boards, pausing at a seam I had not noticed. "I removed a panel from this side," he said. "But there was another cavity, older construction. It was behind the furnace chase, and I could not reach it without tearing out more wall. Miranda told me not to bother. She said the room had been cleared." His voice roughened. "She believed the records were destroyed because I told her I had taken every box she wanted." My knees weakened so suddenly I gripped the table. "Can you show me?" Caleb nodded. Together, we moved a shelf of empty jars and broken tools. Dust rose in a gray cloud, catching in my throat. Behind it, he pressed along a narrow strip of wood until a section shifted inward. The sound was small, almost polite. That made it worse. Inside was a second cavity, packed with a cloth-wrapped bundle and several file folders swollen from age. I felt the baby move low in my body, or perhaps it was only fear tightening every muscle at once. Caleb did not reach inside. "Those are likely the originals she never knew survived," he said. "If they match what you found, they may show who filed what and when." I looked at the bundle, then at him. "Will you say that to someone official?" He stared toward the open doorway, where late afternoon wind bent the weeds flat against the gravel. "I have been waiting for somebody to ask me that." From the inner pocket of his jacket, Caleb pulled an unsigned affidavit form. He had brought it with him. He held it out, his hand shaking once before he steadied it. "I'll write what I saw." I took the form in both hands while Caleb stood beside the opened wall cavity and the untouched bundle waited in the dark behind him. For approximately 3 weeks, I had kept Caleb's unsigned affidavit near the archive, read the surviving originals until the words blurred, and learned how expensive silence could become before anyone filed a single complaint. On Saturday, November 21st, night had settled hard over Bryan County when headlights swept across the annex window. I knew Dorian's car by the uneven hum before I saw it. My body reacted before my mind did. My mouth went dry. I put the affidavit beneath the lien records, slipped the photograph deeper into my coat pocket, and waited. Dorian came to the annex door without knocking at first. Then he knocked twice, softly, as though gentleness could change what he had done. When I opened the door, he looked thinner than he had in Cedar Falls. His office supply jacket was unzipped, and rain had darkened the shoulders. He stared past me at the work table. "Let me explain," he said. "You have had months," I told him. "I know." His eyes flicked to my stomach and away again. That hurt in a different place than I expected. "Mom told me you bought this property. She said you were digging through old junk and that it could become a problem. I came because I didn't want you blindsided." I laughed once, without humor. "I found a lien for $74,200 with my name on it. I found your signature in Bryan County after you told me you had never been here. I think the blindsiding happened already." Dorian stepped inside only when I moved away from the doorway. The annex seemed smaller with him in it. He smelled of wet wool and car heater air, not home. He looked at the documents but did not touch them. "The lien existed," he said at last. "I knew there was paperwork. Mom said it was temporary, that she was moving debt from one place to another before it hurt us. She said she would remove it before you ever saw it." The words landed with an awful plainness. Not denial, not confusion. A choice he had made and called temporary. My hands trembled against my sides. "You knew my name was on it?" "She said it was administrative," he replied. "I signed papers because she told me the business debt had to be cleaned up. I was already behind, Jessica. I didn't want another fight. I thought she had it handled." "You thought she had me handled." His face changed then, but not enough. He reached into his jacket and brought out an envelope, thick and cream-colored. "She wants to make this go away. Sell her the archive, give her the papers, and she can settle the lien. You keep the house, you keep whatever you need for the baby. We keep this inside the family." He did not name an amount. That made the offer feel colder, not kinder. I looked at the envelope, but did not take it. "Your mother watched you throw me out." "I was scared," Dorian said. "I am still scared, but this could ruin her." The rain tapped the metal roof in quick, sharp bursts. I thought of Miranda's initials beside my name. Mara holding an envelope by its corners. Caleb standing at the hidden wall, finally willing to speak. The people who had looked away had all had reasons. I understood reasons. I had spent my job counting medication inventory, catching small discrepancies before they became losses. But an explanation was not the same thing as a correction. If someone who hurt you says they were afraid, would you believe them or not? Write your choice below. What I did with Dorian's offer would decide whether these records stayed buried or entered the light. "I am not selling anything," I said, "and I am not protecting your mother from what she did." Dorian's jaw tightened. "Jessica, please, let me explain it to her. Let me fix it." "You had your chance to fix it before you put my suitcase in the trunk." I stepped aside and pointed toward the yard. "Leave." For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he placed the envelope on the table, then picked it back up when I did not touch it. He walked out into the rain. I followed as far as the annex threshold and watched him cross the gravel to his car. His headlights turned toward the county road, then dwindled between the black trees until there was nothing left but wet darkness. Inside, I opened my laptop at the work table and completed the county form requesting a public records hearing. I attached the document list, Caleb's contact information, and copies of the lien pages. My finger hovered over the final submission button while the old heater clicked behind me. Then I pressed it. The confirmation screen showed the request transmitted to the Bryan County Records Building. I stood there with the blue light reflecting off the papers, knowing the next answer would not come quietly. For roughly a month, I had worked from the Ellery House kitchen table, sorting copies, answering county emails, and learning how much silence could fit inside an official envelope. On Saturday afternoon, December 19th, I entered the Bryan County Courthouse hearing room with my coat still holding the cold smell of wet leaves. My palms were damp around the strap of my handbag where I had tucked the house deed. Dorian sat 2 rows behind Miranda, his shoulders folded inward. Miranda wore a gray suit and the expression she used when contractors disappointed her. Mara Vance had come because I had asked her. Caleb Doon had come because the county clerk had sent him the hearing notice after I listed him as a witness. The room was smaller than I expected, with scratched wooden chairs, a buzzing fluorescent fixture, and one high window looking over the bare branches outside. I placed the originals, already marked by the county staff, on the long table before me. Their paper smelled faintly of dust, old glue, and the annex wall where they had waited. Miranda's sharp, rose lacquer scent reached me from the far end of the room. It was strongest when she leaned toward the kitchen corner memory in my head, her hand on the counter, Dorian carrying my suitcase, her mouth set in that practical little line. I kept my eyes on the documents. "These are the original loan records," I said. "The lien against me was created with my identity, but without my knowledge or consent." Miranda gave a small laugh that did not reach her face. "People survive by being practical," she said. "Jessica is upset because she does not understand business paperwork." Dorian flinched at that, and Mara's jaw tightened. I showed the signature pages, the dates that did not match, and the records linking the loans to Dorian's failed side business. Mara described delivering sealed envelopes from Miranda to the former annex owner. She spoke slowly, as if reading addresses from a route book. "I remember addresses," Mara said, "and I remember when people ask you not to look too closely at an envelope." Caleb then explained that Miranda had paid him to clear the annex before its owner died. "That job never felt right," he said, staring at the tabletop. "She told me the boxes were junk. They were not junk." The hearing officer asked whether anyone could explain the altered filing date. The room went still enough that I could hear the radiator knocking behind the wall. Then the back door opened. An older woman in a navy wool coat stood there, gripping a worn leather purse with both hands. Her white hair was pinned neatly at her neck, but her face had the gray, strained look of someone who had not slept. "My name is Vera Holt," she said. "I retired as deputy county clerk." She had recognized an old file number on the public hearing agenda, she explained, and had come without being summoned. Miranda's face changed first. The color left it so quickly that I felt cold despite the heater. Vera walked to the table and looked at the originals without touching them. "The record knows," she said, her voice shaking. She told us she had handled the lien filing years earlier when Miranda brought in paperwork and insisted the date had to be corrected before Dorian's debt became visible. Miranda had threatened Dorian's future, saying he would lose his work, his credit, and any chance to recover if Vera refused. Vera had been afraid, and she had hidden the originals in the annex instead of destroying them. Then she looked directly at me. I backdated the lien because Miranda told me Jessica would never see the original. A sound came out of Miranda's throat, sharp and furious. "You have no proof of what I said." Vera pulled a signed affidavit from her purse, the ink dark and fresh against the white page. She placed it on the table with both hands. The county officer took it, reviewed the signature, and carried it to the evidence cabinet beside the wall. I watched the metal door close on Vera's affidavit, heard the latch catch, and felt my knees weaken. It was not relief exactly. It was the sensation of a locked room finally opening. The officer announced that the county would freeze the lien pending formal investigation and further proceedings. Dorian stood then, though he looked as if standing cost him. He did not look at me right away. He looked at Miranda. "You used Jessica," he said. His voice cracked once, then steadied. "You used me, too. You made my debt into her trap because you thought she would stay quiet." Miranda stared at him, and for the first time I saw no answer forming behind her eyes. Mara reached across the space between our chairs and pressed 2 fingers against my wrist. I did not need to turn around to know Caleb was still there. The room had heard enough. The county had heard enough, and Miranda's careful version of the record had nowhere left to hide. For roughly 4 months, I had lived by courthouse notices, pharmacy inventory deadlines, prenatal appointments, and the steady work of making the Ellery house safe enough to sleep in, without listening for every sound. On Saturday morning, April 17th, spring light lay across the Broward County Courthouse hearing room in long, pale rectangles. The divorce papers waited on the table in front of me. Dorian sat across from me in a clean shirt with no office supply badge clipped to his belt. Miranda stood near the corridor door, separate from him now, her hands locked around the handle of her purse. The hearing officer had already confirmed the property settlement. The house remained mine. I read every page before signing. That was slower than Dorian wanted, but he did not interrupt. My pen scratched over the final line, and the sound seemed louder than it should have in that quiet room. When I finished, I slid the signed decree across the table. The court clerk's office would take it from there, file it, and make the end official. Dorian watched my hand withdraw. His eyes looked tired, not wounded in the way he once hoped would make me comfort him. "So that's it?" he asked. I folded my pen into my palm and said, "That is what you signed." He nodded once, with his mouth pressed into a thin line. Miranda moved closer before I could leave. Her rose lacquer scent arrived ahead of her, sharp and sweet, the same smell that had filled the apartment kitchen while my suitcase sat outside. My throat tightened from instinct, but I did not step back. She searched my face as if she expected to find the woman who had counted every dollar in fear and apologized for taking up space. "You have made this very difficult," she said. I looked at her without raising my voice. "You made it public when you put my name on your debt." Dorian turned away toward the corridor. He did not ask me to explain. He did not ask me to stay. I walked through the hearing room door and into the courthouse corridor. Behind me, Dorian remained there with Miranda, both of them framed by the dull brown walls and the closed door of the room where our marriage had ended. Miranda's perfume followed for a few steps, then faded under the cleaner scent of old tile and spring air drifting through the front entrance. I did not shrink from it. I did not hurry. Outside, the courthouse steps were warm under the morning sun, and the wind lifted a loose strand of hair from my cheek. At the bottom step, I stopped only long enough to tighten my grip on the keys. The Ellery house waited beyond the county road, with its repaired heater, its annex, and the rooms I would fill in my own time. I walked into the spring light without looking back. The house keys rested in my coat pocket, cold and solid against my fingers. They had once meant a locked building at the end of a county road, $600 left in my account, and a fear I could barely name. Now I took them out and closed my hand around them. There are things people hide in walls because they believe the person who finds them will be too tired, too frightened, or too alone to use them. If you want the next story about another door that opened on a buried record, subscribe so you do not miss it.